Okay, Larry.
Yeah.
Well, you can watch the meeting later.
You can watch it on YouTube, and you don't have to be on YouTube. It's a win-win.
I wish Carlos gave us a heads up. Like, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what's up.
I mean, he gave a heads up, but I don't know if you were here to hear that.
Yeah, did give a heads up.
It
Though.
says live on YouTube, but I don't see it live on YouTube yet, buddy.
It is live on YouTube.
Hello, I'm sorry.
I didn't see it live, bro. It still doesn't show on my feed, so.
You're not subscribed to the Rock.
Bro, I'm like
Subscribe to my channel.
I'm like the person who's seen probably the most things on the channel. Like I alone have half the views on all our stuff, bro. Chill.
Say what the YouTubers say. Say what the YouTubers say.
What do they say?
Hey, what's up? This is the Rock Miami Church here, and we're bringing you with the new Bible Lab.
Don't forget to like and subscribe
man.
below.
That's at the end. That's at the end.
Oh man.
Oh, man.
Okay,
We're gonna be getting started soon, but before that, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for all of you guys watching this video. Let's see. I think
Make sure to smash that like button.
last week we got like what? 1 like. I think this time we can double it. What do you guys think? That's it. Let's do it.
Let's
go
do
for 2
2.
likes. Let's do 2 likes. I think we got this, guys. Come on. You guys are the
believe
best.
in you.
Let's go, Rocker Gang. Let's go.
Larry,
man.
I think you
Don't
should
say
stay.
Rocker Gang. Don't say Rocker
Come on,
Gang.
Rocker Gang.
Please, dude. Please. All right, for all that are logged in, let's go to 1 Corinthians 4. We're about to start in a few.
Wow. Once you said we're streaming on YouTube, we lost half our people, bro. That's how you get rid of them.
I did say it. Though.
Yeah, but I think we were picturing you were gonna be streaming on YouTube, not necessarily that you were streaming the Zoom on
It's
YouTube.
this whole thing. It's
Streaming
this whole
Zoom
thing.
on YouTube?
Right. This everything that we see is what he's streaming.
Oh.
Right.
Emmanuel, yes, you
What?
say hi. You don't leave.
Hey,
I waved.
some people,
That's what he was.
because I'm already YouTube famous because of my original video back in middle
Because of-
school. My
The
middle
one
school
where you
video.
spelled video wrong?
That's right. Environmental video.
That's my
Oh
favorite.
my god.
Oh, I didn't know Daniela was camera shy.
I am not.
I still don't see it.
Okay.
Where are you?
She's like, I'm not. Proceeds to continue.
All right, it's 8 p.m. So we can start, and we're gonna have a stream for this Bible Lab for like the duration of Bible Lab, and then after that, we'll be able to end the stream. But for those that logged in online, there's something very unusual for us. But in this present season, we're doing it because just to be able to be connected and to learn the Word together. If anybody is on YouTube, you guys can go into via Zoom.
Can you put the link?
The ID is 305-559-0708, and the passcode is 1618. Let me get it a bit closer. I think I'm a little bit far here. So for those that are wanting to log in and place some questions on the chat, we'll be able to do that here. So there's our second week doing this in the present situation that we have now. So usually how this goes for whoever is new on the stream or on Zoom, we're gonna be going through the passage, and then we're gonna go through it verse by verse, and examining what the passage is saying. So yeah, somebody was gonna say something? No? All right, just checking. Feel free to, you guys can mute yourself, and feel free to like raise your hand or unmute yourself, so that we can have like a good time and a good time together. The only way it's gonna be good time is if we focus on the passage, y'all, just participate and ask questions and make comments and make sure we have covered this whole passage. I have the passage right in front of me, and I hope that you guys can see it all on your computers or on your mobile devices. And I'm gonna ask somebody to read this passage completely, and then we're gonna just dive right into the study. Does somebody volunteer to read the passage? We're gonna go through from verses 1 through 9. After reading it, I'll pray and we can start.
So what verse?
1 Corinthians 4, 1 through 9.
Through 9. Okay. All right, I'll do it. It's okay. This is how one should regard us, as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. But with me, it is a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by any human court. In fact, I do not even judge myself, for I am not aware of anything against myself, but I am not thereby acquitted. It is the Lord who judges me. Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart. Then each one will receive his commendation from God. I have applied all these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, brothers, that you may learn by us not to go beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up in favor of one against another. For who sees anything different in you? What do you have that you did not receive? If you then receive it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? Already you have all you want. Already you have become rich. Without us, you have become kings. And you would that, and would that you did reign. Yeah. So that we might share the rule with you. For I think that God has exhibited us apostles as last of all, like men sentenced to death, because we have become a spectacle to the world, to angels and to men.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, we thank you. We thank you for this time here together. We thank you we're able to connect online. Thank you that we're able to just simply be with one another and have, in a sense, fellowship with one another, connected and devoted to your word, God. I pray you may bless us this time in the passage. Help us to be focused, even though we're all in different locations in Miami, Lord, but in a way, Lord, this is just awesome that we are simply being the church scattered in Miami.
Everyone has their camera on.
I pray that you may bless this time. Help us to be focused on what this passage is saying, and that we may be all simply edified, Lord, by what your word says. I pray you may help us, Lord, to in this hard time that we are disconnected, Lord, to have community and to be connected from a distance through the technology that we have. And Lord, I pray you may protect us, Lord, protect our church. And Lord, just joining our voices with everybody else in the world, Lord, praying that this current pandemic may go away soon, God. Protect us, protect our people, and Lord, also, Lord, encourage our faith and increase our trust in this season. I pray for that. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Let me see. I know that you guys can see me. I'm not sure if you guys can see me on the screen while I'm talking about the passage. I think not. So give me a second so I can connect my other device here.
Well, we have you on the top.
Okay. What about if I have it on this screen?
Well, we saw you in the other one. It's just more distant.
You mean you can see me on another screen?
No, like so on the same screen on the top, or on the side, depending on how they have it. It's like a bunch of everyone's webcam lined up, or and you're one of them.
Oh, okay. 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 I'm just
But
checking
it's
the
not.
stream.
But it's
real
not like
quick.
a really big one though. So
I hear you. Let me just change something here real quick. Just gonna set something up here. Thank you everybody for your patience. Right. Can you guys see me on the screen?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah. Does my face appear on the screen? Yeah, it does. I see it now.
are you referring to the YouTube screen?
I'm referring to the YouTube screen, yeah.
Oh, well, I think you can just pin it. So on whatever account that is, just pin the Rock Miami account that you have, and then it'll stay on that one forever.
Let me see.
So on that Rock 3 account, or whichever one you're using, pin just another one of you. You pin it by just double clicking. You double click and it should work.
Let's check. See, I'm not sure they're doing that though. Let's see. All right, I think it's working. I'm not sure. I think it is. All right. I think I'm gonna start anyways, and then
Yeah, we can see you clearly on the Rock Miami Church, the one that's called Rock Miami Church, but it's muted. But we're hearing your voice from another login.
Right. Just I would pin the Rock Miami one because Rock 3 is that one's a little, that camera angle's awkward. Like I have you pinned right now on the Rock Miami, and I see the whiteboard. I see all of it.
Yeah, the one I'm trying to pin is just the one that's on the screen here. We just started for now. I don't think it's working. But you can see me on the Rock Miami one.
Just not on YouTube, but on our screens. But again, I think there's only 2 people on YouTube, and I think it's me and you. So I think you're okay.
All right. All right. Let's go through our passage, which is the most important part. So we're getting into 1 Corinthians 4:1. Over here. And we're seeing in verse 1 that he begins with how we're supposed to be regarding them. We're seeing in verse 1 here, this is how one should regard us. And it talks about as servants and as stewards. That's going to be, I think that's going to be a very key word in this passage, to be regarded as servants and as stewards. Pardon me, I muted myself for a second. Pardon. In way of introduction of this whole passage, he has been talking about how Paul and Apollos have to be regarded, how him and Apollos have to be regarded, and what they're doing for the church, and what they're doing for the church. Now, we know that he gave the example of being. He gave the example of being. Of them being like master builders, and then in the last passage, he gave the big example of being as stewards. You guys can see in 1 Corinthians 3, if you guys can go beforehand to that, he talks about this division. Then he talks about how they're being regarded, how they're being divided. And in verses 5 to 9, he says, what then is Apollos and what then is Paul? And he breaks off from like talking about Cephas and Jesus, and he starts talking about Apollos and about Paul, and how they are simply servants that God is using, but God is doing the supernatural thing. He is going to be continuing with that same direction of how they are supposed to be regarded, because the problem here, as we've been talking about the problems that there is in the book of 1 Corinthians, we see here that there's a problem of carnality, and he's still fleshing out the aspect of division that he has to be talking about. So the flesh of the Corinthian people has shown itself in division, in jealousy, and strife, and how they have regarded these godly teachers. And we remember that he mentioned beforehand about Cephas, about Jesus, about Paul and Apollos, and then he singles Paul and Apollos out. And he's going to make a mention of that, the fact that he has singled Paul and Apollos out. He did that in chapter 3. And he says, regard us, not as anything. You guys are regarding us and using us for a purpose of division. You guys are not supposed to be viewing us in a sense to be divided. So that is his frustration. He says, you guys have kind of pinned us up against each other, and you're using us as a reason for division. And in chapter 3, he says, we are just servants. And then he ends chapter 3 like we ended last week, that we are yours. That if you're going to regard us, why are you going to get division into something that all of you guys have? Verse 21 of last chapter. Let no one boast in men. All things are yours. Paul, Apollos, Cephas, the world, life, death, the present, the future. All of these things are yours. And you are Christ, and Christ's is God's. So he goes from that idea of servants, and then he reminds them again in verse 1, this is how one should regard us, as servants of Christ. And the transition point here in verse 1, if you guys are seeing the passage, he goes from servants to stewards. We are just servants of Christ. How should somebody regard us? Well, last chapter 3, he's been talking a lot about being a servant. And now he's going to head into this aspect. We are stewards. We're just stewards. If anybody's going to regard us, and this word right here is going to be very helpful in defining what we've been talking about, judging a lot. He says, we are servants. If you guys want to view us in one way, don't view us as this great people that you are to be boasting on and getting divided on. But if anything, regard us as servants. And then afterward, he's saying stewards. It's very interesting how he gets into this new word, stewards. Now, if you guys have your Bibles with you, we're going to get into this word stewards a little bit, and you guys can go to say Matthew 24, to Matthew 24. And this word of steward is going to become a little bit more alive with this passage, because this is what he is.
And you don't have.
Sorry?
There's no one here that will say.
Oh, if anybody, I'm just going to mute all the mics here. If anybody has a question, just feel free
Yeah, I think that in muting all of the mics, you might have muted yourself.
Sorry, my bad. My bad. Thank you for letting me know. Let me see. So in reference to Matthew, in Matthew 24, I was just getting there. Matthew 24, verses 45 to 51. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household? So here comes the idea of servant in Matthew 24, 45. And the master has said, you're going to steward my household. Matthew 24, 45 is a very helpful verse. To give them their food at the proper time. Blessed is the servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to bid his fellow servants and eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that servant will come in a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And there's a parable directly from Jesus, and that matters because afterwards in 1 Corinthians 7 we see that Paul really takes value to what the Lord himself has said. And here in Matthew 24 he says, hey, he is looking for that faithful and wise servant. And in this passage he talks about a servant that has been given a household, and that in verse 45 we can see that the servant that was set over that household, he was in charge of giving away the food. So here we see the idea of a servant, here we see the idea of a steward, and both of these concepts are here in verse 1. And in verse 1 in Matthew, in chapter 4 of 1 Corinthians, says, we're just servants of Christ and we are stewards. We have been given over something. Jesus himself says there's going to be a servant and there's going to be a given over, and that servant has to be always ready for whatever for always ready, always laboring. And he also describes in that parable a wicked servant, one that says, my master is never going to come. My master is delayed. My master is not going to get here right now. Maybe I can, maybe he comes in a week or so. I have time to like have a good time right now and not even work, beat up other servants, like I said in that passage. And he says that is a wicked servant. The description in Matthew 24 of a good servant is one good and a faithful one who has been entrusted something, and that servant is laboring as the master has told him, and taking good care of that house from that master. It's not his house. It is not, and it is he's in charge of providing for that home and taking care of that home until that master comes back. So there's an idea here of being a servant of Christ and being a steward. And this is synonymous words in the Greek. There's a lot of other words that are similar, but this word of being a steward is a lowly term. These terms of steward and slave, stewards and servants are very, very close to the word slave. I'll write them on the screen here. Very, very close to what the terminology that we use for that. Servants and stewards. Very lowly terms.
Carlos, your voice is getting really staticky. I don't know if that's just for me. Does anyone else hear that, or is that just me?
No,
It's staticky as well. Yeah, for
Okay.
me.
Let me switch it up here. How about now? How does it sound now?
You're good.
I'm good. I'm better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Let me see if I can set up this camera somehow.
Again, the Rock Miami one is really good, bro. You
Okay.
don't I don't think you need a third one.
All right. So we have this concept of being servant and stewards as very slave-like terms, and it brings into mind those passages from Matthew 24 that Jesus is telling about those that good and faithful servants. So that's how they are to be regarded. That's how they are to be looked at. He's asking them, you guys are supposed to be looking at us as servants. You guys are supposed to be looking at us as stewards. And stewards of what? Stewards of the mysteries of God. What are these mysteries of God? Simply said, all the things that have been fleshed out in the New Testament for people to understand. The New Testament, the gospel revelation, everything in the New Testament is the mysteries of God. Everything that has been revealed is the mysteries of God. So what are they to be doing? We are serving. We are servants of Christ. We do have a master, and we are stewards of what? We are stewards of the scriptures. And with Matthew 24:45 in mind, it says that who is that faithful and wise servant? The one that has been set over the household, and they're bringing the food at the proper time. Very similar to what they are. These Paul regarded himself as such. He regarded Paul as such, and he's saying we are simply servants, and we are stewarding something. We are stewarding this household of God and bringing food to it. The mysteries of God. They are the stewards of the New Testament, the gospel revealed understanding, and they're giving that to the people of God. They're bringing in those all that knowledge and feeding the people of God with the word, with the scriptures. That's simply what it means. And look at, moreover, in verse 2, this kind of like applies to all of us, because in a sense, not only Paul and Apollos are stewards, and he says, moreover, as in like widening the vision or widening the understanding of what a steward is. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. There's a big term. Just like it says in Matthew 24:45, who is that faithful and wise servant? There's one requirement of that steward, is that he may be found faithful. He may be found faithful. That is the only requirement of a steward. Maybe he is bringing up those requirements because also the Corinthian people have been kind of evaluating the different teachers and judging them. And he's setting up and saying, this is what the requirements of servant stewards are. And he starts talking about, there's one requirement. Steward's job is very simple. And here in this verse, it's like one of the requirements that they be faithful, that they be faithful. Let's go to verse 3. Then in verse 3, we find that but word as it's saying, but instead of that, with me, it is a very small thing. It is a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by any human court. In fact, I don't even judge myself. He brings in 3 categories. And this word, judge, is a word called anakrino, which in NASB or in another words, in Greek is anakrino, but anakrino itself, because a lot of other versions translate that to the word examine. So I want us to, we have been talking about in Bible Lab for a long time about getting this good understanding of the word judge. And here we get a lot of help, because here we can see that he is just using it in a lot of different ways. Assessing, there's appraising, rightly evaluating, judging, discerning. Here he says kind of like the word examine. But in verse 2, look at in verse 3. But with me, it is a very small thing that I should be examined by you, or to be examined by any human court. It is a small thing for me, the way that you guys are examining me, is what he's saying to the Corinthian church. And it talks about not only the Corinthian church and them as the body of Christ examining him and judging him in this way, assessing him or evaluating him in this way. He also brings up the aspect of another human court, which he will talk about later in this book as well, because they have grab people from church and they're going to human courts and being examined by human courts instead of examining their own selves with the scriptures. So he says it's a small thing for me that you guys are examining me, or that any other human court outside of that is examining me as well. Last part of the verse. In fact, I don't even examine my own self. He's bringing this idea of being a steward and being a servant and saying, I'm not caring about and not concerned about how you guys are examining me, or the human court is saying, or how other people are examining me. With the idea of who he is serving, he is concerned about the one whom he is serving, and and the master is the one that's going to be examining him. So he says, I don't care about how you guys examine me or other human courts. I don't even examine my own self. And he goes on with this idea of his own self right here. I am not aware of anything against myself. He's biased against his own self because as my conscience is clean, I'm not aware of anything bad that specifically I have done. Like any one of us, like if we were examining ourselves, just looking inwards, man, our conscience will be clean. Just like he is saying, I'm not really aware of anything against myself. I don't know of any wrongdoing that I have done particularly. But he says, but I am not. And he clarifies that. But even though I feel like I'm not aware of anything that I have against my own self, but I'm not thereby acquitted, is what the last part of verse 4 is. Acquitted. By that, it doesn't mean that I am to be found innocent because of that assessment. Just because I feel good against myself and I don't really care about anybody else doesn't mean that I am therefore acquitted. And there's the final phrase here in this verse that really helps out and really directs them to think, okay, what is it? What evaluation really matters? What examination really matters? You're saying that it's a little thing for you to be assessed by people, by human courts, even by your own self. But then, okay, what is it that really matters? At the end of verse 4, we see it is the Lord who judges me. It is the Lord who judges me. This is a very good, just by thinking about these first 4 verses, a very good application I think to have is that we already have an assessment or an understanding, a godly understanding of where our examination should go towards. We should be very concerned of being servants and being stewards before the Lord, because the Lord is the one that does the examination. There's a lot of the worldliness that is happening here, and the separation that is happening in the church of Corinth happens because they're evaluating each other just in different ways and for different reasons. They're examining each other, I don't know, because of fame, because of popularity, one is attractive, one is more skilled, one is more winsome, or they just have a friendship with one and not with the other. They know one and not the other, and separating based on a teacher, feeling more. Maybe some of them felt even as more mature because they were with a different teacher, as having a reason to boast because of a different teacher. And he is going completely against that worldliness. And if we have some of that worldliness, or we're separating for different things, or we're evaluating different Bible teachers in that matter, this passage goes directly against that. Regard those people as servants, as stewards. He's going to further on describe this, but a servant and a steward of God, a servant of Christ and a steward of the mysteries of God is just that. It's a person who is serving the Lord and who is sharing God's word to God's people. At least in the aspect of Apollos and Paul, these apostles, or this idea of Christian leadership and pastors, they're servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God.
Anything outside of that is really not the call that God has given to pastor teachers. Very important to see that, because some of us or some people may be just honestly, it's very easy to see that in the world right now that we live in, and how just the worldliness has affected Christianity worldwide. One of the ways that it affects us is just by this worldly evaluation, by this worldly perspective. How successful is a pastor? They see at the size of the church. They see how attractive his church is, how winsome he may be, or how attractive he may be towards people. And that is not a way that we should be kind of like evaluating them, giving different grades to different Bible teachers or pastor teachers. That's not a way to evaluate them. The way that we evaluate them, one of the ways that we can see here, simply is that they're servants, they're stewards, they're the lowliest of the low. They want to be seen, and they are to be working as the lowliest of the low. Servants, stewards, faithful servants. Nobody's thinking when they go, think about this. Think about it in chapter 3. They were talking about building a temple. Think about that, about those slaves that were building this huge, huge temple of God in the Old Testament. And a ton of different workers just working to putting a brick here and setting up a foundation over there and bringing materials. It'd be very silly for us to be kind of regarding them in that sense, regarding them and seeing them and thinking, oh, this is a very good slave. This is a very good servant. Look at this guy carrying rocks. Look at this guy setting a foundation. It's very silly to say the big deal of everything that is going on in this building of a temple is this slave right here. The slave will look at you confused and say, really, this is not what we're really doing here. We're making a temple because God is going to dwell in this temple. It's a big deal what's happening here because of the one that's going to come and dwell here amongst his people. It's not really like you should be putting your eyes on me. I'm just bringing a couple of bricks, or I'm just setting a foundation with a shovel here, or I'm just helping with this guy pick up a brick and move it to place it in place to start building this huge temple. But it's very silly for us to say, man, we actually have a master here coordinating this whole thing, and you actually have your eyes on me, the lowliest of the low. This is not what we're doing. We're actually, the main goal here is to build this huge temple. And the temple is a big deal because of the one that's going to come and dwell in this temple. And here they are Paul is kind of coming with this. He's astounded at them saying, you guys are seeing which steward is better. That's all we are. We are servants of Christ. We're stewards of the mysteries of God. And he gives us a perspective of how he views his own self. And his own self, he reveals it here at the end of verse 4. I don't care about how anybody examines me. I don't care how anybody by any human standard may evaluate me. I see my own self as a servant, as a steward. I am very concerned, at the end of verse 4, of the Lord, who is the one who is going to examine me. And he gives that final warning, like in a sense of exhortation right there in verse 5. Therefore, don't pronounce judgment, don't do an assessment. This term right here is the same an assessment in a kind of negative tone. Don't make an assessment, don't make a judgment, don't make an examination before the time. A negative one. Don't set this. Don't say you have the final word before the time, before the Lord comes. Here, bringing again the focus towards who really does the examination. The time when that would happen is when the Lord comes. Look at Paul's perspective here. And he speaks here about when the Lord comes, he will bring to light the things that are hidden in darkness and will disclose It's a very challenging term here. He will disclose the purposes of the heart. When the Lord comes, he will bring to light everything. Just like it says in Matthew 24, he will come at an appointed time and he will bring to light the things that were hidden. And all the purpose of the heart will be revealed. It matters a lot here because this is where we get the understanding that motivation before the Lord really matters. That motivation for the Lord really matters. Our heart's purposes before the Lord really matters. In the same language of having a steward and having faithful stewards come and serve the master well, when he comes back and he reveals everything. Look at what Paul simply says, very matter-of-factly, at the end of this verse 5. Then each one will receive his commendation from God. Each one will receive his commendation from God. Honestly, just by seeing this passage, that's what really Paul is really focusing on. That's what Paul is really doing. That's what Paul is really after with the Corinthian people. He's being a servant, he's stewarding. He's very concerned about what the Lord would say. And he is looking forward to that commendation that's going to come from God. Don't examine before the time comes. God is the only one that brings he is the only one that knows the heart. Doesn't mean that we don't examine people if somebody is right or wrong. You can do that with the scriptures. What he is calling about these wrong judgments is that they're being judged in the world standards and not the Lord's. Nothing wrong about exhorting somebody if they're in the wrong, but honestly, if we are to be exhorting other people, we really have to do it under the understanding of who the master is. If we are to be exhorting or encouraging or rebuking one another, we exhort one another as co-workers or co-laborers in the Lord. We don't set a judgment like the master's going to set a judgment. We have to kind of like say to each other, if there's anything wrong that we may be doing and any right exhortation that may happen, it has to happen as like, hey, we're supposed to be serving the Lord here. Hey, we're supposed to be stewards of the Lord here. And really the real master and the one that's going to really do the examination and final judgment is the Lord. We're all supposed to be encouraging one another to get that commendation from God and exhorting one another when we're not focused on that as co-laborers, as fellow servants, as fellow stewards. So Paul, the point of kind of like this big passage here, this big idea in this verses 1-5, this beginning part, we are stewards. Paul says about himself, we are stewards looking for a servant. We are stewards looking for a reward. All Christians are. Regard us as such. We are stewards looking for a reward. Regard us, assess us, consider us as such. Just stewards looking for reward under a master. Instead of what they are doing, the divisions and the pitting up against each other, he says, you guys are supposed to be regarding us simply as stewards, just stewards. So I wanted to make a pause mid-passage. I don't know if anybody there has maybe a comment, or you guys can put it on the chat. Anything you guys want to add towards the passage here, verses 1-5? I have the chat open. You guys can unmute yourself too.
Hello?
Yeah, we're listening.
Okay, so I have NASB translation, which is pretty interesting because verse 5, it kind of translates the verse a little bit differently. It says, let me see. It says, therefore, do not go on passing judgment before the time, but wait until the Lord comes, who will both bring to light the things hidden in the darkness and disclose the motives of men's hearts. And then each man's praise will come to him from God. And so, I mean, I'm using the Riri Study Bible, and in the footnote, it says that for verse 5, it says, at the judgment seat of Christ, when motives are revealed, all believers will receive some praise from God, for all will bear some fruit. So I don't know, like, I feel like the translation is a little bit different from the ESV, right? That's the translation that we're reading from on the screen.
Yes.
That's a bit crazy. I don't know if you have some thoughts about that.
About what specific? Point that out specifically. I
Just-
think the last part that you're saying.
Yeah, because in the ESV translation, it just says that God will bring to light the things hidden in the darkness. In the NASB translation, it says that God will bring both things that are from the light, I guess the good that we produce, and also the bad things produced in the darkness. I don't know, it says both. It's there, that's like the key word in the NASB translation. It says, until the Lord comes, who will both bring to light the things hidden in the darkness and disclose the motives of men's hearts. And then each man's praise will come to him from God. Like, I don't know, I feel like the translation is a little bit drastic, or maybe I'm just reading it wrong.
Well,
No.
so there, it's saying both in referring to bringing things from light into dark, so from the darkness into light. That's one thing, and then the second thing is disclosing and revealing the motives of the heart. So that's the both. So one of them is things from darkness to light, and the other thing is the motives of the heart out.
Yeah. See. Yeah, we'll bring the things that in this version, in the ESV, it does say who will bring the things who will bring to light the things that are hidden in darkness. It will disclose. So he will enlighten in a sense, and he will disclose. Those are like two key words here. He will bring to light, and he will disclose. The things of the heart will be brought out, and the things which are hidden works, whatever it may be, anything that is in the darkness will be brought to light. That's a great point, though. Really interesting the NASB translation. Anybody else have any comments, anything to add?
I have a question.
Tíralo.
In verse 1 where he said stewards, is he talking about like specifically their stewardship of scripture, or is he talking like in general?
And this has been saying stewards, service of Christ, stewards of the mysteries of God, stewards of the scriptures. Okay. So he's talking about those that is specific.
So then when he says servers, he's also, or servants, I'm sorry, he's also talking about like how they feed the mysteries of God, right? Because it's in the same sentence. Yeah.
Well, apparently there are two different things. He's like talking about their own selves in different ways, which he has, after this passage, I noticed that because they are viewing them in a way that they don't want to be viewed, Paul is, in a sense, explaining his own job. He's explaining his role to the Corinthian people. So he talks about he says we're here to be servants. We're here to be like people who are laboring. He's bringing those pictures of like laboring in the ground, and he brings the idea of like building up this building, but they are kind of like under a master. And here in chapter 4, he's talking about those. He is speaking about the stewardship of the scriptures. That's why Matthew 24:45 I think is very helpful, because it says both in Matthew 24 and also in Luke 12. You guys can can look for them there. It says that the job of the one that has been given over the house is not only to take care of the house, but to give them their food at the proper time. That's what Matthew 24:45, that the role of that steward is simple. He is to be in charge of the house, take care of that house, and bring in the food and provide for it at the right time. So here he is doing exactly that. He is serving Christ, and he's a steward of the mysteries of God. He's a lowly servant bringing in basically the food, basically the scriptures to God's people. That's the only thing. That's the only thing that he is doing, and that's the only kind of task that he is laboring for. So, mysteries of God would be that the scriptures, the word, that's what basically they are. They are New Testament preachers. They're New Testament pastors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So it's also helpful as an application to an instruction to remember that if anybody brings anything additional as a pastor teacher, he is not doing his job. He brings anything additional, he is not doing his job. I was very sad the other day, kind of like just a little bit of just passionate, some bad emotions, because there was literally an interview about from this pastor with another with an interview there, and he was just answering back and forth about what his job was, and he said, well, I honestly at times have gotten the criticism of sweetening the message, and I speak about the gospel, and I talk to people about the gospel, and then they say, hey, I get sound good or sound sweeter. And some people may say he's sugarcoating the gospel. And the pastor would defend himself and say, yes, I am sugarcoating the gospel. I'm doing something so that people can receive it better. That is not the role of a steward of the mysteries of Christ. That is completely wrong what he was doing. Saying, sweetening the words of God for them to sound better. That's not what we're supposed to be doing in this picture of Matthew 24 of a steward bringing in food to the house. It's like grabbing the food. You're supposed to be a waiter for that food, and the role of the steward is simply to get that food from point A to point B. And if I grab that food and I sweeten it and I change it up and I set it up in a whole different way, it is no longer the chef's food, and I did not do my job. It is then now my food, and I've given them something completely different that the chef did not give me. So when somebody comes and says, "Oh, I try to talk about other things, to maybe anything extra, anything additional, any kind of like sweetening of God's message," is simply not faithfulness. Like this passage says, in verse 2, it is required for a steward to become faithful. How do you know there's somebody faithful? Well, they do the job. They do the job. That's how you see that somebody is faithful. I got a comment here. Sorry, I didn't get a comment here. Basically, somebody faithful, just full. In verse 2, it says faithful. Stewards, basically somebody that fulfills the role. Like at the end, I was thinking about this earlier today, that in a marriage, there can be ups and downs. There could be the loss of like a connection between a wife and a woman, but after 50 years of faithfulness, and to hear that commendation of 50 years married, nothing is going to change the fact that they are still married. They might say, we had our ups and downs, but at the end of the day, my spouse, you were faithful. They can consider each other faithful because of being committed to what their role inside of marriage was, which was to be faithful to one another. It doesn't matter the ups and downs or anything, but they remained faithful. Faithful is a very simple term. It's a very simple term. It's a very just simple, like a waiter. How do you know there was a good waiter at a restaurant? He took the food from the kitchen to the table at the right time. A very simple job. They enjoyed the food of the chef at the right time. That's considered, man, that is a faithful waiter. He just delivered the food. Very simple job. We should be very, very concerned about that. Because look at the end of verse 5, to receive our commendation. That's his big concern. That's the huge concern from Paul, to receive his reward. It's a little thing. It's a little thing for them to think, for him to think, I don't care about you guys, because to be honest, you guys are not my bosses. I don't care about the people of Corinth that are evaluating me weirdly. I don't care about any human court. I don't even care about my own self. Why? Because if I'm an employee of God, I'm not going to be paying my own self. I'm not going to be rewarding my own self. What I'm seeking here is a reward from the master. There's not a foreign language from what the Lord says. For example, in Matthew 6, just listen to the word reward as I read it here. Matthew 6, 1-4. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret, he will reward you. And then it goes on in the passage and it says that whoever does it before men and gets the praise before men, he has already got the reward. Paul is not concerned about that earthly reward. He is very concerned about that heavenly reward, that heavenly commendation from his master. He is a servant and a steward below a master, and he is seeking the reward from that master. And it's a very instructive thing for us that can be very much, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of like, with this, we're doing the best we can with this whole camera and stuff, but I'm not gonna lie, I get self-conscious in front of these cameras. I'm doing it because I want to connect with you guys in the best way possible, but I'm self-conscious, and I do not like to be self-conscious because I get aware of other people. In a sense, we all have this awareness of how other people are evaluating us in school and life. Paul is making it very clear here. He is very concerned, not about people pleasing, but about God pleasing. And he says, you guys are evaluating me like that, but to be honest, you guys are not a category for me. I am very concerned about how I can please the Lord. That's what he is really concerned about.
Felipe, you gonna wash or what?
Remember to
I forget to unmute myself.
You gotta make sure to keep yourself unmuted.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So, because you're using the wording reward around the end of what you were saying, so where it says here, then each one will receive a commendation from God. Last week we spoke about the rewards, right? That are tested, like when we'll be tested by fire, and then we'll be given our rewards. So, is based off the wording you're using, is the reward he's speaking about that we spoke about last week, and the commendations that we're reading now, are these the same thing in Paul's eyes, or are these separate matters?
Yeah, you're referring to like the chapter 3 verse 12 where it says, now if anyone built on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stone, and wood, hay, and straw. That's a very good observation. Yes, he was talking about the exact things, exact same things. The reward that we're getting in heaven, from the motivation that we have, those are going to be eternal. So if we build with gold, silver, and precious stones, they will pass the fire that is called in 1 Corinthians 3, and we will have that reward in heaven. That is not going to be the same thing for those people that saw the reward here on earth. They're going to lose that, and that's going to stay there, and that's it. That was the reward. But for those that labor like that, and God sees their motivation, and God sees that they were laboring for Him, they will receive the reward. So that's a very good observation, man. Yes, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Anyone else before we go on to like the next verses 6 through 9? All right, we can move on. It's a very encouraging thing to see that what his concern is about pleasing that master. It's a very helpful thing when we have this people-pleasing heart, or this concern about how other people may view us. This viewpoint that he has of seeing himself simply as a faithful steward, very concerned that God is seeing him all the time, and he wants to be laboring for him all the time, and he's pursuing that reward. It's a very helpful thing. It's a very instructive thing for us to be overtly concerned, to be very, very concerned about what the Lord commands, and not to be concerned by any other kind of evaluation. And he continues on with that in verses 6 through 9. This passage is going to get, afterwards for next week, is going to get very, very helpful with all the picture that he's talking about. But here he talks about how he applies this to himself and to Apollos. Verse 6, I have applied all these things to myself and to Apollos. I'll exemplify this with myself and Apollos. And the reason why I'm doing it is for your benefit. He is doing it for them, so they can learn. So I'm doing this for your benefit, my brothers and the dear angel, that you may learn by us not to go beyond what is written. Not to go beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up in favor of one against the other. So he says here, I don't want you guys to go beyond what is written. He's going to talk a little bit more about what that means in the rest of the passage here. But he does not want them to be boasting in them. I don't want you guys to be puffed up in favor of one against another. This is an introductory verse. This is verse 6 as we go on with the rest of the passage here, because he's going to talk about that whole puffing up that they have. I applied all these things to myself, so you guys can be benefited by this. So you guys can see us and be benefiting, that you may learn by us, look at us and learn by us. So you guys do not go beyond what is written. This passage right here, this phrase right here, beyond what is written, it's a very interesting, bit puzzling passage. But this is the one that has cost me the most from this passage today. But I think I understand what it's saying, and talking about what's below here. So basically, what I understand this part of not going beyond what is written. I think they're saying like not receiving. One of the main thoughts that I had was that it's not receiving the reward before it's time to go beyond what is written, because they're modeling that. They're Paul and Apollos are here, just painting a picture of what is happening in the context, and they're exemplifying with their own lives something so that they can see that they're not going beyond what is written. So in a sense, maybe there's a humble view of each other, there's humble laboring. They're not getting in, they're seeing themselves as servants, as stewards, and not looking to like rank ones against each other. The reason why I think that is because the reason why he's saying that you may learn from us to not go beyond what is written is that none of you may be puffed up. We don't want to give a reason for you guys to puff up against each other by saying I'm Apollos and I am Paul. I don't want that. I want you guys to see us and to learn by us. Don't go beyond what is written. Maybe he's talking about this letter here. Don't go beyond what I've written in this letter. That none of you may be puffed up in favor against each other, like to be boasting on us and just ranking yourself up against each other because of us. So if anybody has any thoughts about that verse, that would be very helpful before we get into verse 7. You guys can like unmute yourself or something, but that's what I'm understanding here. He is saying from this part right here, do not go beyond what is written. Maybe he's saying that he is, two things that I'm thinking is that beyond what he has written in this letter. Or the other option is maybe beyond of getting the reward before it's time. Don't go beyond that. Don't seek your reward now. You have gone beyond what the Lord has said. The Lord says, "Pray for your reward." And you guys have gone beyond that. And this is not the time to get a reward. So that's my kind of understanding there. I don't know if any of you guys have anything to say, or you guys can feel. If you guys want to unmute yourself, you guys can write it in the comments. But I would be very interesting about your perspective on verse 6 here. No one wants to unmute themselves right now. It's cool. Let's see. All right, we're gonna move on. Verse 7. 3 questions. Now see, these are rhetorical, and you can feel a sarcasm here. 3 questions for who sees anything different in you? What do you have that you did not receive? If then you receive it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? A reasoning sarcasm, that sarcasm is going to increase though. But these questions are rhetorical, and he's coming and challenging them and giving this exhorting term and kind of challenging their thinking. Who sees anything different in you? Are you guys any different? Does anybody see any different in you? Because we see ourselves as stewards and as servants, and you guys have this attitude that is not the attitude of servant, steward attitude. It's not there's nothing anything different here. You guys are puffing against each other. Is there anything different here? Is there anything different? We are believers, all saved in the same way. Is there anything different in this context for us? What's going on here? Second question, what do you have that you did not receive? He's saying, you guys, there's nothing different in you guys. We're all the same. What do you have that you not receive? Everything is a gift from God. Everything that has been given to you, whether it be your salvation, spiritual gifts, understanding of the scriptures, Apollos, we can go into what the end of chapter 3 says, like all things are yours. All of these things that you have been gifted. And see, if you have received it, the beginning of the third question, why do you boast? As if you did not receive it. What is the reason of your boasting? Because honestly, you guys just received this. Why is there a reason for boasting as if you did not receive it? So, end of chapter 3 says that all things are yours. Paul is the earth, the present, the death, life, all these things are yours. And you guys received it. And now you guys are using this as a reason for boasting about a gift that all of you guys have. So I said a while ago about Matthew 6, about this idea of in Matthew 6, in verse, if I'm not mistaken, verse 5. And when you pray, you going on with the idea of rewards and focusing on the one who sees in secret. Verse 5 of chapter 6, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. They want the reward. They wanted to be kind of seen by others. They wanted that recognition, that human recognition. And what these Corinthian people are doing, we're seeking, in a sense, that recognition from each other. One of us, some of us are better than the other. Some people are in the wrong, we're in the right, we're better. And he talks about in different chapters, he talks about are we going to boast in our riches? Are we going to boast in power and strength? Are we going to boast in our wisdom? There's no reason for boast. The only reason for boast is a boast in the Lord. And any other kind of commendation is a lowly commendation, like it's pointing out in Matthew 6. We're not supposed to be looking for that earthly reward. But since they were looking for that reward, here on earth, that lowly reward, that earthly boast, Look at verse 8. Already you have all that you want. Sarcasm. Already you have become rich. Without us, you have become kings. And would that you did reign, so that we might share the rule with you. As in saying, you guys have already achieved it. You guys nailed it. You guys are already winning. You have everything that you want. You have become already rich. You have become already kings. And he says, man, you guys think of yourself as kings. Man, only that you guys were kings, so we could share that rule with you. But man, we're not able to. We're lowly. We're just stewards. We're just servants. We can't rule like you guys. We can't be rich like you guys. Man, you guys have all that you want, and we're here just lowly. Can't be ruling right now like you guys. Sarcasm. It's a sarcasm. It's a sarcastic tone. I was saying, man, you guys are so great. So great. As apostles, not so great as you guys. You guys have received all that you guys want already. All those exclamations. It's a bit of a heavy sarcasm there, but it's an instructive sarcasm that's saying, this is what you guys want. You guys want to boast about this matter, and hey, you're getting it. Some people may be seeing you as great. You guys might be seeing yourselves as great. Basically, it is, you guys are getting earthly reward, and we honestly are not on that agenda. That's what Paul is saying about himself and Apollos. We're just stewards, we're just servants. Lowly stewards, lowly servants, lowly slaves. It's a very instructive idea to bring this into our own selves, because as believers, we are to be seeing each other and ourselves as lowly slaves. The world is going to tempt us for reasons for boast, to lift our name up or to lift ourselves up, in some sense, to have a sense of pride in our own selves, a worldly boast. It's very instructive. In the middle of a lot of wilderness, it's a very instructive word for us to know. We're just slaves. We're just slaves. That's all we are. Just slaves. Verse 9. For I think that God has exhibited us apostles. This is a helpful term. This is apostolic humility display. Apostolic humility displayed in this passage, in this verse right here. I think that God has exhibited us. There's a real like direction. We're gonna be brought into in this passage into a real direction to what our humility and what our pursuit and our mindset should be in this lifetime before we go to glory. This is how God has exhibited. He says, we have been exhibited as apostles as last of all. We are not only last of all, we are like men sentenced to death. Because we have become a spectacle. We're going to get into that word in a moment. We have become a spectacle to the world, to the angels, and to men. So you're saying, you guys see yourselves as so rich and everything, but as apostles, you guys have gone kind of beyond what is written here in the aspect that I'm thinking of. Because apostles are just the last ones. Jesus said one time to James and John, and when he was talking about who was going to be the greatest, and he mentioned, if somebody wants to be the greatest, become like this little child. Become smaller. Look at yourself as little childs before the Lord. Look at yourself as lowly. He also warned them different times to the apostles that there was going to be a time where they're going to be basically killed. The disciples, all of them suffered a really, really awful death. All of them except one of the disciples just died because of the faith. And the one that survived got tortured horribly. And that's what God wanted in his providence. That's what he wanted to do. And he understands that. Paul understands what is going on here. But he says, I just know that God I know that God has exhibited us to be just like men sentenced to death, because we have become a spectacle to the world. This idea of spectacle is this idea of simply like in the Greek times. And there's something that's mentioned more than a couple of times in the scriptures, that there was a bringing in of after a after a ruler. The idea is after a ruler would win, he would basically come and have a parade down the city. After they would come and win from a war or win from battle, they would parade down the city. And after they paraded down, they would simply, the whole army would come, and the people would see the army come victorious, and the horses and the soldiers and the whole army would just be seen in a whole great line. And at the end, you would see this group of captured people. And those were the people that in this aspect, the word spectacle, and some of the wording here you guys will see next week. It says we are to be seen like that, like a spectacle, for us to be displayed before everybody. And here we know the audience, the world, angels, and men. The people, the angels are seeing them as well. There's a lot of other mentions of in 1 Corinthians about angels and how we do things and the angels are viewing all of these. The angels are witnessing God's glory through the work in his people. And also the people are seeing them, because and also with respect to go to men. It's very interesting how the perspective that the world has, for example, towards what we're doing right now, or towards what a pastor teacher does every single week. They think it's a spectacle. They think it's weird. They think it's odd. They think, why are you guys focusing on an old book? Why are you guys getting together to hear from an old book all the time? It's a spectacle to them. They don't understand it. And they see it as something like, wow, those people are ignorantly captured by this book and just going to waste their lives. And some people that come to Christianity have maybe even even some people hear those warnings even from their own family, from their own parents. You're going to waste your life becoming a fanatic. You're going to become give yourself to them. Don't give yourself so much to that thing. I think, is this like a hobby to you, giving yourself to God, or you become like a Christian? It's a spectacle. People see people giving their lives to Christ as a spectacle. And he understands that. Paul understands. Okay, he says it right there. Interesting how God has exhibited us apostles as, last of all, we are like men sentenced to death. We're becoming this, in a sense, a spectacle. It applies to us, but in that day and age, it wasn't that weird to see Christians being captured and paraded before people, and then placed in a coliseum where it'll be a spectacle to the whole world, and they will be therefore slaughtered or placed into battle in an unfair way. So he says, just like that, physically, that was happening at that time. People are being sentenced to death like that. People are being paraded like that, martyred like that. Just like that, also, Christianity and humble servanthood and stewardship doesn't make sense to the world. It's seen as a spectacle. It does not make sense to what the world views. And God is seeing. God knows this. Paul knows this. That he is being seen by the world. He's being seen by angels. He's being seen by others. Paul and Apollos know this. They're displaying their life so that they can be learned from, but they know what it looks like. They know that earthly eyes, they know what that looks like, but he's not concerned about those earthly eyes, and we are not to be concerned also about those earthly eyes. We know that when you give your life to Christ and everything that you do for God, it's a glorious thing. It's a glorious thing. And it's going to be on a beautiful, beautiful commendation we can't imagine right now. But that is a commendation and a reward that we are supposed to be focused on. Even though it may look like a spectacle, and the world may have its words against Christianity and to a faithful Christian, but a faithful Christian should be focused on the master, just like Paul is being focused on the master here. He does not care about what other people think. He's trying to instruct the Corinthians out of that worldly mentality. I'm gonna end soon with some. We're gonna end the stream soon with some concluding thoughts. But I want to know before we end the study here, if anybody has any comments or anybody has anything to add. You guys can unmute yourself or put a comment on the chat.
Well, I wanted to say that at least like as you go more in depth in verse 9, like it's helpful in my mind to sort of see in the idea of not caring what other people think, because like at least for the most part it's easy to say that, and sometimes like our mindset is like I only care what God thinks, but at the same time it just so happens everyone also thinks of us like great or something, and so it's easy to like say I only care what God thinks when everyone also thinks as us as like someone cool or popular or whatever. But like with Paul, like we know like Paul, like there's more weight behind what he's saying in that fact, because not only to himself but to everyone else he's acknowledging like, yes, I'm saying I only care what God thinks, but I'm also acknowledging like everyone else, they see me as like a joke, and like I know that, and even though I know the fact that they treat me like a joke and they see me as a joke, I still only care what God thinks of me, which I feel like at least for me like adds more weight behind his words. And it's like if he who he knew people saw him as like the lowest of the low, and he's still saying like God's is the only person, he's the only one that I care that judges me, then I mean for us like it's not like we can like, you know, like that's like, you know, I don't know, at least for me that shows like, well, like it's not like he's not being a hypocrite in that sense, right? Because you know they didn't see him in a good way, and so it's like it's sort of like him backing up his words, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. He is living. He is practically just revealing his own perspective, which is really helpful for him to display his own perspective. But he's basically just saying, hey, this is who I am. This is what I think. If you guys are concerned about how you guys are judging other people, honestly, this is how I'm judging my own self. This is how I think of my own self, and this is how I'm assessing my own self. So in that sense, it's very, very helpful to hear his own commendation, his own perspective about how he values himself. So anyone else in the chat wants to share? I'm glad that you guys are connected. Glad that we can be able to like share this time together.
I want to say something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Kathy.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right. The part that impacted me the most is verse 6, where he says, I have applied all these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, brothers, and that you may learn by us not to go beyond what is written. Okay, for me, that first part, he's showing the example of unity, you know, against what they were doing in the beginning. Like, oh, we're for Apollos, we're for Paul, and he's like, listen, we're like, it's kind of like I kind of see my kids in this a little bit, like when they have like, oh yeah, like daddy's better, or no, mommy's better, I like mom more, I like dad more. It's like, no, we're in this together, like we're united, there's no sides, like we're one team, because ultimately we're under God, we're under Christ, and he's showing that example there of unity, and how he's under Christ. And I love the fact that he doesn't care, because really, if you look at it here, he's popular. He could have totally gotten puffed up. He could have totally been like, oh yeah, like I'm the best, like everybody, huh? And so could Apollos, and he didn't. Instead, they were both humble and they said, hey, like, this is not about us. This is about Christ. And I see that a lot now in the church, how like you said kind of, and it can even happen in our own church. Like, oh, like, you know, the Van Dalens, or like, oh, Muppet, he's so cool. And I, you know, yeah, like I really like him while he preaches, and oh, I like her. You know what I mean? And that's like, at the end of the day, he doesn't, it's not about him. And I think that there's such a freedom that he lives in that, because whether people like him, like these people do, or whether they don't, like the Jews did, it doesn't matter, because he's free in Christ, because he just does whatever he needs to do for Christ, looking at that ultimate goal. And honestly, at the end of the day, I think I would look up to is this freedom and this richness and this, you know, yeah, his position doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So he's free from Satan's attack. And he's telling them, I want you to have that same freedom. But you need to get off of this, like, you know, whole side thing, like, and get over yourself and just put your eyes on Christ. That's what I got, and that's what like I really liked about that part.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Very, very freeing to live in that perspective. But yeah, that's true. He's also displaying the unity between themselves. He does that in chapter 3. Talks about how they're co-laborers in two different senses. So it's a very instructive thing that we can be united under Christ and also experience that freedom and be focused on the right thing, and focused on serving the Lord, being stewards for the Lord. It's a very freeing thing. So yeah, they are enslaved by this worldly mentality. It's a very enslaving thing. People pleasing, being focused on other people is a very enslaving thing. ¿Alguien más?
I thought, I don't know if this makes sense, but I thought like the way that he says that they're just servants and stewards reminded me of 2 Timothy, like where he talks about like how he's really in the context like talking about elders, how they should be above reproach, and like all of these really great like praiseworthy things. But like we have to, like the mature Christian will apply those things like to themselves, like to make sure that we are also above reproach, so we are also like active in the Great Commission, like all of those things, like we should apply it to ourselves as well. And I love that like Paul, like he is those things because like the testimony of his life is evident. He is those things. He is above reproach. He is a mature Christian. He is like really like giving it all for the gospel, but he still calls himself like just a servant and just a steward. And I love that, because like if you're just like, I don't know, like if I guess like, I don't know, I just like that's what has been like pumping, like jumping out to me the most, just like the quality, I guess, like the quality of like the Holy Spirit's work in our lives, and the quality, like the sweetness of the fruits of the Spirit that that's produced from our lives, but like the humility of like, I'm just a servant and I'm just a steward. Like kind of like learning how to live into that dynamic, I think is helpful. And like Paul lays it out for us.
Yeah. He's going to continue to hold it up to lay it out in the next part of the passage. And it's going to be a very helpful thing for us as Christians to just flesh out that the humility, that humble aspect of being a believer, of walking the walk of Christ.
Yeah. And I'm just like thinking of what Kathy said, like how cool that like in our unity, like our unity is stronger when we together, like as like a friend group, or as just like brother and sister in Christ, or sister and sister, whatever, like when we have that mentality of like being like servants and stewards, like just having that humility. And then like thinking of like a marriage, like Kathy said, like Kathy and Alfred, like just as an example, because she said it, like what she said, like that would happen only because like they are seeing themselves individually in their marriage as just servants and stewards. Like that's why they would point to Christ alone, like to their children, you know?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And the unity found there too. The example that Kathy put up is very helpful to that. Usually like people kind of, they do this, that worldliness, one of the ways that worldliness is expressed in this is in this idea of separation based on teachers or on different things. And basically our eyes are to be concerned not on each other and not on, like he was saying here, not on what makes us, how am I different than them? And kind of like use that as a pedestal for your own self, to boast and to puff up, to make yourself different because of that. And just like Kathy was giving that example of family, how it's not about that, it's about being united, or being like a family, not finding reasons for division, which is not what God intended. But there's also the additional concern that he brings in here. That is not what the master, our master intended, our Lord intended for us. And all of that is going to have an eternal consequence. That's why he's working for that commendation, that reward. So it's also this aspect about, we want to model unity, we want to model togetherness, we don't want to model any divisions from the flesh. There's also a heavy warning here to not be to seek that commendation from the Lord, because if you do not pursue that, you're going to be laying an account for what you did, unfaithfulness to what God has called you. We're gonna wrap up. Start wrapping up here in a few. But just the idea of he's gonna continue about the perspective toward the apostles next week, and that's gonna be the rest of the passage. And we're gonna receive more of that mentality about being lonely. But then we're gonna end with this last part about his motivation, about a lot of application, I think, in this part of the passage at the end. But just finishing up the passage for today, how basically how they are being seen and how they're to be seen as humble. We are to be seeking that kind of faithful is it's a big word here in this passage. And I hope that if you guys can look up this word and look at it in another, just to leave with that in mind, look at the word faithful in other parts of the scriptures. And a lot of the people that were commended for their labor as servants for God, as apostles, Tychicus, Titus, and Titus being instructed to go and look for these faithful men. And that same word is the same word that has been used in different parables from Jesus, straight from the mouth of Jesus. And that's something I think we should be focusing on if we are to be seeing ourselves as Christians. What does this mean? What am I supposed to be doing? Well, do I have any worldliness inside of me? Am I regarding myself wrongly? Am I regarding other people wrongly? Am I regarding pastors and teachers and leaders wrongly? Basically, are we seeking ourselves to be faithful? And are we pursuing other people who are also faithful, doing what God has commanded them to do? And our ministry is all simply here: the ministry of the pastor teachers, the ministry of the apostles, the ministry of us. It's all here. And we can get very creative in the wrong way, use our creativity for the wrong, and step outside and become unfaithful by thinking that Christianity is about something different, or Christianity is about how other people perceive us and how people may examine us. This word faithful is a very, very helpful term. I think this is one of the main characteristics. I was looking into it in the New Testament and how other men were being considered faithful in the New Testament. They were called faithful in different Acts, in Titus, and in the parables. Faithful. And basically, what does it mean to be faithful? Simply to do what the master has told you to do. In the aspect of the parables, to do what the master told you to do, to remain faithful to that. And it's to focus our eyes on the master, to focus our eyes on what he has told us to do, and to focus to get that commendation from God. I mean, at the end of the day, none of us are condemned in Christ. That's what Romans 8:1 says, that therefore there is no condemnation. And those things maybe that we did wrongly, they're going to stay with us, and we're going to experience his glory, but we're going to limit our commendation and our reward by our actions if we're not pursuing those things. And we're going to leave a lot of things here and not take a lot of things to eternity. Paul is bringing our eyes to pursue that commendation from God. And that beautiful phrase that we usually talk about, that Jesus will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful. Did you remain faithful?" Faithful to what the master has told us to do. And Paul is saying, that is my pursuit. We read the passage and pray, close up, and I'll close up the stream. 1 Corinthians 4:1, this is how one should regard us, as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. But with me, it is a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by any human court. In fact, I do not even judge myself, for I am not aware of anything against myself. But I am not thereby acquitted. It is the Lord who judges me. Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light the things now hidden in darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart, that each one will receive his commendation from God. I have applied all these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, brothers, that you may learn by us not to go beyond what is written, that none of you may be puffed up in favor of one against the other. For who sees anything different in you? What do you have that you did not receive? If then you received it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? Already you have all you want. Already you have become rich. Without us, you have become kings. And would that you did reign, so that we might share the rule with you. For I think that God has exhibited us apostles as last of all, like men sentenced to death, because we have become a spectacle to the world, to angels, and to men. So pray, we do, God, pray that we may be faithful and that our eyes may be focused on you, God. We pray that we may be focused on your words and on your words to us, that we may remain faithful to them. And Lord, help us to use your scriptures to, Lord, just discover worldliness in us, and that we may be passionate in getting it out of us, God. That we may renew our minds in the way that we just value, assess, and examine things, and help us to be pursuing how you examine things, God. As we mentioned, Lord, 1 Corinthians 3, help us to build with precious stones, with gold, with things that will last forever, and help us to see the things that we are building on that will not last. And God, help us to trust in you, put our faith in you, Lord, but help us to be a faithful stewards, faithful servants, and to not go beyond, to pursue other things, to not go pursue other matters that you have not called us to, but just to remain faithful. Faithful stewards is what we want to be, God. Help us to be instructed by the life of Paul, in order to help protect us and help us to protect others, Lord, as well, from the worldliness and from the just the damage that worldliness can provoke, Lord, to your people, your church. Help us, Lord, and help us to be instructed by it, and help us to seek to forget about the eyes around us, and make a constant effort to place our eyes on you, pleasing you as a master, and not pleasing other people's standards, even our own, but to place our eyes on your standards and how you are to examine us, God. Work with our hearts. Only you can do that miraculous work, God. Help us to work with our hearts. Help us to surrender to your hearts, that you may work in our wickedness and in our sinful desires, that we may be transformed, Lord, more and more into your likeness. Like now you were saying, that we may be more and more humble, Lord. Help us to do so, God. I thank you for this time here together. Protect our people, protect us. Help us, Lord, to navigate in this day by day right now with this current pandemic that we're going through, God, and help us to remain encouraged in the faith, and help us to remain encouraged with other people, just encouraging one another, God, and help us to simply place our trust in you, and not be affected by so much of our current circumstances, God, but pray and place our eyes on you, and know that you are in control, that you see all things, God. We pray, Father. We thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. I'm going to close the stream.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. We'll be having our Sunday service on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
You guys can see us again next week. Thanks for coming, and have a good night.
Have a good night.